cry.
That's okay.
Yeah. My name is Dr. Christy Morgan, and I am the Arizona Director for Candle Wishes in Phoenix, Arizona.
My name is Jenny Williams. I'm the founder and executive director of the Candle Wishes Foundation. I just really felt this burden come over me for these kids.
Children mean a lot. You never want a child to grow up feeling like they're not loved.
God put this on my heart to want to give these children happy birthdays.
This foundation just touched my heart, so I knew that this was something that I needed to do.
Okay, y'all, I'm not gonna ugly cry. This is terrible.
There was a time in our life where we struggled. There was a time in our life where we lived paycheck to paycheck. One time when we first moved down to Phoenix, a friend of ours, even at Christmas time, paid for my son to have a picture. Paid to have a picture of our son sitting on Santa's lap, and I couldn't afford it because we had just moved across the country. And so that's always stuck with me. If you would love to sponsor a child, if you would like to throw a birthday party, if you would like to just volunteer,
We need your help. Reach out to us so that we can connect and make our community a better place.
Hey, good morning and welcome to Breakthrough Walls. I'm Ken Walls and I'm your host, and I am really excited about the guest I have on today. This guy has been a friend of mine for several years now. I don't even know how many years, probably 7 or 8 years. He's been a client of mine, and he's just a really, really good guy. I'd like to introduce you all to my good friend, Mr. Senator Kevin Bacon. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Ken. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited.
Hey, it's not. I know you've been on the on with Sean Hannity. It's not the same level, but so
I'm looking forward to it. This will be a fun time.
Yeah. So hey, as I told you, I created this show to help people have a breakthrough in life, and I know you've experienced some ups and downs. My first question really for you is, have you ever survived a horrific earthquake?
Yes, and it was it had to have been a 5 on the Richter scale, and just coincidentally, Ken Walls was sitting next to me, and we both survived, and we're both here today smiling and happy and alive, and I can't believe we made it out.
That was, just we were sitting in your conference room at your law practice, and both of us look at each other like, what's going on? Like the whole building's shaking, and it was the only earthquake I can ever remember in Ohio.
Yeah.
It was unreal.
Right in Worthington, Ohio.
Yeah, that was crazy, man. So, and by the way, a lot of people are on here saying good morning. Good morning to everybody on Facebook Live. Thank you all for being here. A lot of people have already shared this out too, so thank you for that. I appreciate that. So, I can't wait for you to kind of, tell your story, Kevin. I know you pretty well, and I know you have, you've been through some stuff in life. So, let's start with telling everybody where you were born and raised.
Well, I grew up in northwestern Ohio in a town called Defiance, Ohio.
Okay.
And I was there until graduating from high school, and then spent 4 years at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and then moved up to Columbus. Well, a year later, I went home and worked, and then went to Columbus a year later, and I went to law school, and I've been in Central Ohio ever since about 1995.
And where did you go to law school?
Capital
University. Okay, pretty popular law school here in Central Ohio.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I loved it. Loved every bit of it, and they continue to make a really strong program there.
So growing up in Defiance, and for those of you who don't know where Defiance is, that's up near Toledo, right?
Yes, it's up in the northwestern part of Ohio. You're right. The county borders the Indiana border, and you're about one county down from Michigan. So you're up there in God's country, northwestern Ohio. But I loved every bit of living up there.
I guess going through school and then you went to, where'd you go to college? Where'd you get your undergrad?
Miami University.
Oh, Miami. Okay. And that's down near Cincy, right? Cincinnati?
Right. It's Oxford, Ohio, just north of Cincinnati, maybe half hour.
Okay. So you went to what did you always know you were going to be an attorney?
Well, I thought early in life that I might be. My dad, who was a big role model of mine, he passed away just before 9/11. I was always intrigued with what he did. He was a lifelong practicing attorney. He got out of law school and got accepted to the FBI and the CIA, and instead chose to move to Defiance, Ohio, where my mom was brought up, and go into the practice of law, which he did ever since. And that's how I was inspired to get into what I do now.
Wow. So I did not know that. I didn't know that your dad was an attorney.
Yes.
So you followed in his footsteps, became an attorney. What did he specialize in?
He did a lot of real estate, a lot of trust, probate, estate planning. In the smaller communities like that, you have to be the jack of all trades sometimes. And he had a very strong civil practice. Didn't do any criminal law, but had a very renowned, very well-known, reputable practice up there with several other partners.
So you came out of law school, probably ready to take on the world, right? So you come out of law school, and what happened? Did you start your own practice?
After law school, no, my first job was with a judge here locally, with Judge O'Grady. Then I spent some time as a prosecutor and worked for the Department of Commerce and some other things before I went into the private sector later on. But I've been have had my own private practice that exists now since about 2009.
Okay. So you went in. Now you said prosecutor. So you were a prosecuting attorney.
I was early in my law practice out in the city of Lancaster.
Wow.
So it was a great way for an attorney fairly fresh out of law school to really get indoctrinated into the practice of law. It's good experience for everyone to have because you get put in. If you're a prosecutor with a very busy docket, and most of them that I know are, you have to be able to make decisions quickly. At least in my situation, and many, it's a very high workload, high stress. And you have to be able to try cases and know the law and be able to do things instinctively. So that was a good challenge for me early in my law career before I went on to other things.
So and I think that I would imagine that at some point along the way during all of that, were there hiccups? Were there obstacles that you hit that?
Always.
Yeah.
When you're in the practice of law, especially prosecution, you have hiccups and obstacles daily because you have so many variables. Yeah. You have a defendant, you have defense attorneys, you have multiple witnesses, you have a judge, you have sometimes jury members. Yeah. But when you go through difficult things, I have, my things in life that I've done that I fall back on that made me, I think persevere and made me a hard worker early in life that I always revert back to that I think was very helpful in many of those situations.
Sure. So, and then at some point, as you're humming along, practicing law, and you do primarily like probate stuff, right?
I do probate. I do estate planning. My specialty area, where my niche, where I get more work, is special needs estate planning. There is a high demand for families who have children with special needs to utilize special needs trusts. Many estate practitioners do not do that. It's a complicated area of law. I have a daughter with autism, so I do a lot in the special needs community. So I kind of realized, why am I not doing this? So some years ago, I took about a year to learn it before I tried to get any clients in that area. So that's my niche in terms of my practice, my niche area where I probably get more work than others. And I'll do anything in probate court or guardianship related, and a little real estate and small business to mix in with that too.
Wow. There's not. You said there's not a lot of people that are working in the special needs area.
That's right. A lot of estate planners don't do special needs trust, but there is a high demand for it, and those of us that do, you can help a lot of people.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I know, because I know that eventually you got into even greater levels of public service. Let's talk a little bit about that. So at some point you decided to run for a public office.
Yeah, I was, when I was getting settled here in Central Ohio, I got out of law school, moved to the village of Minerva Park, got a job, all that fun stuff. I wanted to get more involved in politics. My mom and dad were very involved, were great public servants. My mom's still alive, but my dad has passed. But they were active locally and politically, Republican Party, but also charitably, and also believed in getting people out to vote regardless of their party affiliation. So I grew up around a lot of this early in life. So I'm naturally curious. So after getting out of law school and getting established, that's when I kind of went down the path of elected office within the Republican Party. But then my first office I ran for was township trustee in Blendon Township, which Minerva Park is a part of. So that was my first public office that I ran for at the age of 29.
Wow. I have a friend on here right now. I think he's still on here. Chuck Studebaker. He's down in the Atlanta, Gwinnett County area, and he's a client of ours too. We built his website, but he's running for the very first time ever. He's running for the school board. And he's calling me, we're going through, I'm like, yeah, dude, that stuff happens on a campaign. And, he just got roasted in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. But
campaigns are very, very difficult to maneuver. And if you've never done one before, the first time out, it can be very shocking. I've had to coach a lot of new candidates. And to add on to that, if he's running for school board, that's one of the toughest offices to run for, of any office.
Oh, is it really?
Well, in my opinion, because any public official is under very close scrutiny. But my hat's off to those who serve on school board, because you also have school administrators, but parents that are very emotional, and school board members get put in positions where you can't satisfy everyone. So dealing with the children and the parents and the issues daily is very difficult. You have to have a very thick skin. So hats off to him.
I know. And he's a great guy, man. He's a great guy. But apparently he used a part of his logo is like part of it looks too similar to the school board's logo. So,
I won't comment on that one.
Yeah, so they wrote him up. They wrote him up in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and in the Gwinnett County paper. I'm like, dude, you can't pay for publicity like that. Like, that's awesome. He said, they mentioned my name 10 times in the article. I'm like, that's good. Good. People just unconsciously think, oh, yeah, I've seen his name. So that when you're out there and you're doing the stuff that you're, because I know you started at the trustee you said over in Minerva Park, right?
Yeah, I lived in Minerva Park. It was Blendon Township trustee.
And then what happened next? What was the next step for you in your political career?
Well, it's interesting in elected office. People get to offices in different ways. They have different backgrounds. But what I found was having some time as a township trustee, you learn a lot. You learn about road repair. You learn about hiring a police chief. You learn about managing, I didn't manage the employees directly, but you learn what's like to run a government. So that has been extremely helpful going forward. I gained a lot of experience, started learning more about government and funding, and then ran for re-election to the House of Representatives, for Blendon Township trustee. Mm-hmm. And then after getting elected, we found out that the House seat that I lived in at the time was going to be vacated. a House of Representatives member, Linda Reidelbach, decided to vacate after 4 years instead of serving 8. So I was positioned well to go forward to be able to get the nomination for the Republican side anyway. So that was kind of my transition into legislative elected office.
So you won that, right? You
Barely.
Barely.
Well, and I'm trying to make this a political show, but if I can explain the political landscape, this would have been, I ran in 2005, okay? Mm-hmm. And the district has been changed since then, but it included Minerva Park and Worthington, some of Northland, and at that point was a Democrat favorite. I was running as a Republican, of course. So in the same year, it was a very difficult election cycle. It was the year Democrats won every office statewide. That was when Governor Strickland came in, except Mary Taylor was she won for auditor. She was the only Republican statewide that won. So being in a Democrat-leaning district, it was an extremely difficult race.
Yeah.
I started in the beginning of May and started personally door knocking. And by the time I hit election day, I personally had hit 12,000 doors. Not just leaving a piece of literature in someone's door, but knocking. And when we did the polling, when the pollsters went in the field and did the polling, the people, consultants and things we used on our campaign staff knew I really was knocking, because that gets reflected in your polling. People will say that they met you at the door. Every person got a hand-delivered letter, and then within 3 or 4 or 5 days, I was hitting them personally, and then they got a handwritten note after I was there. And that direct voter contact, and doing that over and over, then we had to raise money to do the TV and radio and all that.
Yeah.
It took all of that to barely get me through by 1.25% or something like that.
And I want to bring up a good point because, again, I'm sure you have friends that are on both sides of the aisle. And I think that the lesson in this whole thing for anybody watching is it really has nothing to do with Republican or Democrat. It has more to do with getting out there and pounding on the doors, pounding the pavement, and putting in the work.
That's right. That's right. Voters love that personal contact.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, if you visit your door, that will make the difference right there. But then also some of the things that you work on make a difference. I do a lot in the special needs community, for example. If I talk to an independent voter or maybe a Democrat voter that really cares about that, I have a good chance that they're going to support me because of that issue, and they'll toss the party label aside. So voting means different things to different people, but without a doubt, personal contact is one of the most effective things I've been able to do.
And that's one of the things that I love about you, because I know that that's not the only campaign where you went out door to door.
That's right.
And you and I both have a mutual friend who's a local Franklin County judge, and he's a beast like that too. I know, right? He is. I used to work for that guy. He's a beast. I
first saw him on his recorder's race when he first ran for recorder.
Yeah. I mean, and so, it's not just guys selling pots and pans and windows and siding and whatever. You're out there doing the work. You're hitting the doors. You're pounding on doors, doing the work. And so, I want to make that really, really clear that it's not running for office, although it looks glamorous because you were on Sean Hannity's show and now an even greater show, mine. No, but so it looks glamorous, but at the end of the day, you go home, you're like, holy crap, my feet hurt and my knuckles hurt. I knocked on 1,000 doors or whatever, right?
Yeah, that's exactly true. And when I talk to aspiring legislative candidates, I get calls, often of people that want to run for office. And the first thing I tell them, if you're going to go run for the Ohio House or the House Senate, they oftentimes think they're going to have this big platform they're going to lay out on the internet and maybe host a debate or go to things where everyone's going to come and watch. And people, especially in Central Ohio, it's densely populated. We have a lot of legislators in close proximity. It gets very cluttered. It's hard for people to pay attention to all what's going on. I say, no, you're kidding yourself if you're going to win an election by getting people to come to you.
Right.
Not in this kind of race. You have to go to them. You still do the candidates forums, and you might get 25, 30 people there or something, and that's a good thing to do too. But I said you have to be willing to invest a lot of time and effort going to the people, because you're only going to have so many that are going to come to you. So
I think there is, again, this show is about helping people have a breakthrough, and I would say that what we're talking about right now, take away all the politics, take away everything, and for the person who's suffering, that can't put $50 together or whatever, like, there's a solution. The solution is called working your face off. Like, go, right? Like, you got to move. You got to go. Like, I think that you could go out and win any election that you ran for, just about, if you went out and personally visited everybody that's a possible voter for you.
It surely does help, and to be able to just kind of go, I revert back to a lot of things when I've been able to be successful in things that were very difficult, but I think back, my dad was a role model of mine and taught me everything I needed to know, and then in sports were times when I got put in very difficult situations.
Yeah.
And I finally thought I met my match when, excuse me, I played football at Miami University. And I was, by then, I was a full contact player, but for the Division 1A teams, they looked at me for punting and not so much as the other positions I played. But first day we showed up at Miami, Coach Walker, met with all of us, and he said, just so you know, just because you're special teams, you're going to be doing everything everybody else does. And that 4 years playing for Coach Randy Walker, God bless his soul, he passed away after he became coach of Northwestern University.
Oh, wow.
But it was one of the hardest things I've ever been through in my life. And they would intentionally put you in situations where you were worn out and you were tired and you didn't think you'd run another sprint. And then they would, you get ready to run a sprint and they'd call a different cadence.
Yeah.
Football might be set, ready, hut. Well, you do that 20 times in a row, then they tell you, now we're going to go on 2. Well, then it's hard to adjust. And of course, one person's going to jump and the whole team has to run. To put yourself in that situation where you have to concentrate when you're tired, you don't think you can take another step, and then force you to function and to think. I still have dreams about that. I wake up in the middle of the night and think, oh my gosh, I'm on the Miami football field and I haven't worked out like this in all these years, and I think I'm back at practice and I'm not in shape. And so those were some very tough things I went through that I pushed through, that I still think back today when I think, well, this is really hard. I'm thinking, now I can put a little more, I can do more. There's more that I can do, and I can work harder because I've done it before. And I had a lot of people that helped me get there. So.
Well, and I again, it comes down to you can always do more. You just said it. Like, there's always more left in the tank. Whether you think there is or not is really irrelevant. Like, you just have to try. You have to go.
Well, and I think, Ken, a lot of people get to a place in their career or their life or their schooling, whatever it may be, and sometimes things start to become repetitious.
Yeah.
They may not be motivated anymore because they're not seeing the successes they want. The first time I ran for the House of Representatives, the adrenaline was sky high. Or the first time I ran for the Senate, sky high. When you run for a new office, you're motivated. When you go to run for re-election, you have to push yourself a little harder because it's just not as invigorating sometimes.
Right.
So there are times like that in your life and you think you're going to stall, and then you have to work through it, or maybe get a new perspective, do your research, find out what else there is out there, reach out to your mentors, your family, all kinds of things like that you can do to get what you want to do back on track, to be able to be successful and motivated and have a happy career.
I can completely relate to that. We all get there, right? We all get burnout, complacent. I think you said complacent, right? You go, man, if I hear one more person ask, how much is a website? No, I'm kidding. But you get to that place where it's like you've done it so much that it becomes Um, too repetitious, probably. But so you ended up leaving. You went from the House of Representatives and into the Ohio State Senate.
I did. I came into the House of Representatives I ran in, I said 2005, or that was wrong. It would have been 2006. So I served 2007 and 8, and then 2009 and 10. So that was 2 terms in the House. And then at that time, excuse me, the existing state senator, David Goodman, was term limited out. So after 4 years in the House, I made the decision, instead of staying in the House 4 more years, I made the decision then to run for the Senate.
I think that's when I met you.
I think so. Yeah.
Because we did your first Senate campaign website.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that.
2010 election.
Yeah. Wow. God, it's been that long.
I think so.
Jeez. So you and you had no guarantees, right? Like you had no guarantees that you're going to win that election.
If you're totally risk averse, then politics isn't for you. I'm not saying everybody has their own degree of risk, and that's not necessarily a bad or good thing, but you definitely have job security to deal with when you have to keep getting reelected to stay in office.
Right. How much insecurity does that bring up?
I tell you what, Ken, I never really thought about it when I was running. I was just always determined to win. And then if it doesn't go your way, you've got some time there at the end of the year to figure out what you're going to do before January. But a lot of drive, a lot of determination. You just have to work hard and have that laser beam focus and go forward and not worry about some of those things. If something like that's going to keep you up at night, then it probably isn't the right career choice.
Yeah. Well, and I think look, if you're going to make it anywhere in life, if you're risk adverse, that's not for you. But I think that it's about anything. Like how I can't relate to somebody. Again, I understand that there are many, many, many people out there that do regular jobs, and that's cool. I've done them. And I think it builds a lot of character. I mean, I worked in farm fields and all that as a kid. I'm sure you did in Defiance, Ohio. I would imagine.
I didn't in farm fields, but I did a lot of things that I didn't want to do to be able to save money to be able to do things later on.
Right. So but that's the thing is a friend of mine was telling me the other day that he interviewed some kid fresh out of college that sat down in the interview and tells the owner of the company, hey, listen, to save us both some time, if this doesn't start at $70,000 a year, I'm not interested. Like, I said, what? What? This is a fresh college grad I'm like, what? He said that? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, what'd you say? He said, get out of my office then. Like, no, it doesn't start at 70,000. But, again, like, it requires, I think that, and maybe it's social media that's causing it. I don't know what it is, but I think that there's a huge part of the population that thinks it all comes easy, it comes fast, it's overnight, right? Mm-hmm. I have friends that are mega millionaires that are like, yeah, it was overnight. It took 15 years. That's overnight, right? Or 20 years or whatever, right? So what are like some along the way though, like leaving the House of Representatives, you go to the Senate, you still have your law practice, right? You're still practicing law.
Yeah, my entire time in the General Assembly, I've had employment outside of it, which is fairly common.
Right.
I was doing legal work I was doing regulatory and legislative work with Farmers Insurance, their state executive office here in Ohio, when I was transitioning into the House of Representatives. And I stayed with them in their branch legal office for a while, then started up my own practice. So yeah, that's part of for many of us, that's part of being in the General Assembly, is not only campaigning, but having to juggle 2 jobs as well.
Right. So what are some of the challenges that you have faced. And when I say that, I'm talking about, again, I think that, a lot of people look at politicians as a bunch of evil people that are out to really help themselves and nobody else. And there's this weird thing that people, and I know and that's not the case, but what are some of the challenges as a public servant in the state Senate, House of Representatives, or whatever level? What are some of the challenges that you face in helping your constituents?
Yeah, well, you kind of got into part of it there, Ken. One of the challenges, it is hard sometimes to broadcast what we do. We're doing things nonstop, sometimes having very long days from early morning to late night. It's virtually impossible to keep all of your constituents updated on everything that you do. And so when you talk about the perception that people have of politicians, oftentimes they'll say, much like they say about lawyers, well, I hate lawyers, I hate politicians, except for my lawyer.
Right.
So the story to be learned from that is when you personalize things, it changes.
Right.
When you think of these people as a group and you hear some of the rhetoric, then people's perceptions are different. So it is challenging. We work with a lot of issues. Many of what we do is not divisive. Contrary to what people think, we pass bipartisan bills all the time in the General Assembly.
Yeah.
Very high percentage of bills are Democrat and Republicans that vote on them. But that's not as much fun in the media. A lot of those bills aren't going to get covered quite as much. So many of them do, but some of them aren't going to get the coverage. So more contentious bills are more likely to get covered in the media. Sometimes we just think differently in terms of our philosophy, and it's not necessarily anything personal. I can tell you in the Senate, we always want to get our message out there, but come and watch the House Senate operate sometime. By and large, it's collegial. Most of the time it is. Most of us are good friends across the aisle, Republican and Democrat. You learn how to work with each other. I know that it's maybe a little different on the federal level right now, but even many of them have the same work in the same fashion, but it's hard to see that when you can't see what all of them are doing. So getting that message out, I've worked on many large pieces of legislation, have been able to get many of them passed, and have done a lot of great things also for constituents that are never going to hit the newspaper. So those are the kind of things that are hard to get the word out to people what we're doing.
Well, and I've said many times, don't compare your movie to someone else's highlight reel. And I think that a lot of people, and again, I not everybody, but I think a lot of people see these tiny little sound bites on the news or read a 3-paragraph article about a bill or about something going on in government, and they just don't. They're basing their entire opinion, which is what the writer of that article wanted you to do, right? They wanted you to base your entire existence on what they wrote about this particular thing, and you're not. It's like 99.9% of the time you're not seeing 90% of what's going on.
Well, Ken, I've done a lot of media since I got into elected office. First as a township trustee, it was mostly local newspaper. And then it went on to doing a lot of TV and radio, and for the media, they're trying to get a message through very quickly and succinctly, and each of them much differently.
Sure.
If you go on TV, you might have your picture in 3 bullet points, and that reporter has to explain it in very general terms very quickly to get any attention. Then they're on to the next screen. You ever see how many times the screen changes in TV shows now or in news?
Yeah.
They got to keep people's attention. So yes, and that's where when you do interviews, you try to get the right message across.
Right.
Because there's only going to be so much that they're actually going to run on the TV or in the newspaper. There's only going to be a small portion of what you actually said.
Right. So you what's going on now? You're still a state senator. You have a law practice. You're practicing law. What's coming up for you?
I'm finishing my term in the General Assembly at the end of this year. Then I'll continue to practice law, going full time into January. In many of the areas that I'm practicing now, there are also things that I can do, state legislative or executive agency related, that I can't do now because of conflicts of interest. So I'm going to finish up strong. We have what's called lame duck session. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that or not, but at the end of this year, we'll have a month, and this is the time period. I'll explain it quickly, because the lame duck session in the General Assembly is probably where the most happens in the least amount of time.
Wow.
We're finishing our General Assembly. Every 2 years is a new General Assembly. We're finishing that at the end of this year. And so we have bills that many of us want to get passed before the end of the year, because after the end of the year, the bills expire. If you go into January, you have to reintroduce the bill. In my case, I can't. I'm not going to be here.
Right.
So we'll come back. We're typically off from sometime in May or June in an election year. Then we'll come back after the election. Now, many of us still work. When I say off, I mean we're not doing the full Senate voting sessions.
Right.
So we'll come back in November after the election and have about a month from middle of November to middle of December to finish up the bills that we've worked on, in many cases even up to 2 years.
Wow.
To get them done before the end of the year. So we work very hard, many late night voting sessions. I've been in the State House every minute on the clock every day of the week, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, whatever it may be, to get all this done before the end of the year. Many of these bills take a lot of vetting, and you have to pay attention and do a lot of work to make sure you get it right. So I'll be going back. This is my last hurrah, but I'll be going back full bore here for this lame duck session to get it done. And just so you know, the lame duck, I'll explain something that might be interesting to the viewers.
Yeah.
Candidly, most states do not have a lame duck session. Lame duck is when you have session days after the election, but before the General Assembly expires. And the reason that's controversial is some people may want to tend to push bills until after the election so they don't have to deal with them before. You also have a higher number of legislators that are term limited or not running again that may feel differently about a vote. So some people look at it different ways as to whether it's a good or bad thing. But what I can say is a lot gets done in that time period before we leave, because your pressure is good oftentimes for all of us, and the pressure is on all of us now to get our work complete before the end of the year.
Well, where does the term lame duck even, where's that originate?
You know what? I don't recall historically where it started. I think I may have researched it at one point, but it's a common term that's
I've heard of it. I never knew what it was. So people that like you're at the end of your term, you're at term limit, right? Like
I'm term limited out of the Senate. That's correct.
Yeah. And so you're done with public office for now.
For now, in the General Assembly, term limits were enacted by ballot initiative back in the late 1990s. It was not the General Assembly that did that. So you can serve 8 years in the House or 8 years in the Senate, and then you can run again after you've left for 4. So oftentimes legislators will go back and forth from the House and the Senate. So that wasn't just something that I didn't have interest in doing. About a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I started thinking and working on what I was going to do after I left here, and it was pretty much all private sector related. I had offices that I could run for.
Yeah.
I decided not to, with the exception that I would run if my congressional seat opened up, and it did open up last year. Unfortunately, it was unsuccessful. My only election I ever lost was unsuccessful in the primary, but it's okay because that was the only office that at that time I was interested in running for.
Yeah.
So now I'm back to my plan I'd originally set before that. So
governor.
Not anytime soon. So no, it'd be full private sector at the turn of the year.
Yeah.
Planned that all along. I didn't plan on doing this my entire career.
Right. Well, I know you've done some amazing things. I know that you helped I think it was you that presented the bill to help autistic children and special needs children here in the state of Ohio, and I know that bill got passed.
I've done quite a few.
Yeah.
I've worked on a few pieces of legislation, special needs and autism related. Going back to, my first year in the General Assembly even. So it's always, what happens in the General Assembly is if you work, if you have an issue of particular interest to others, and if you do one thing in that area, they will start to come. So my first term in the General Assembly, the Ohio Autism Society knew I had a daughter with autism, so they wanted me to work on a program to get $800,000 for a 2-year time span to diagnose children earlier with autism. And it was an educational effort with doctors and teachers and healthcare providers. So I came in as a first-term House of Representatives member with a Democrat governor, and we got this idea. We worked on it. So I contacted the governor's office, and I actually had assurances from the governor that he would support that line item in the budget before I even had assurances, in my own party.
Wow.
So it was a good example of working bipartisan fashion. Make a long story short, that did pass. We got the money in, and there were attempts by certain state agencies to get a line item vetoed at the end, right before the budget passed.
Wow.
Not because they were against autism, but because they wanted the money to go to cancer or something. This is where it gets tough in the General Assembly. It's all important,
Yeah.
So I thought we got it passed. I thought the next year this is going to be a fight to be able to keep the money in because we knew people wanted to use it for other things. Magically, the data that we produced as part of this program was in high demand, and we had 3 different state programs that were using that data. So we were able to quantify all the positive impacts of the program, and after that it was a piece of cake. Then we were able to do it ongoing at a much lower cost, and the demand for the information we had was so high. So then more people start to come to you from the disabilities community to get legislation passed, knowing that you're the one that did that first piece of legislation. So I just naturally worked on those issues throughout in many different fashions.
And I wanted you on the show because I wanted, again, there's the stereotype of politicians, and when you've been on my live streams, I've said he's not like it's the stereotype of a. I wanted people to know that, because I know that you get letters and probably emails and from all kinds of people in your I don't know if it's called a district or whatever area you serve, that have all the different issues, and I know you as a human being, not just a politician, and I know that you actually care about people, and you actually care about serving people and helping people. And yes, I believe there are plenty of politicians that could give 2 craps about serving people or helping people. There's plenty of them, right? But you're not one of them. I think that there's a lot of politicians that do genuinely care.
Oh yeah, and many of them do. And in the state General Assembly, my district has about 330,000 people. It's big, but it's still small enough that we can, I think, manage our constituent base very well.
Yeah.
The first day I came to the General Assembly, my House staff and my Senate staff, they know that they can pretty much just book meetings as we get phone calls. One, maybe someone that works on Capitol Square that has a bill they're working on for a client, or one might just be a constituent that has an idea. So the meetings pretty much just get booked without getting any permission from me as to what they want to talk about or what they want to do. Now, there could be exceptions to that. We've had a few things in the past that people may have wanted to come in on a dicey legal issue or issue that had some legal ramifications that we had to, have them do something else that we couldn't get involved in. But by and large, and I'll just come in and I'll have my slate of meetings for the day and we'll go through them. And oftentimes you can help people in ways that you don't think of as a legislator. It's not always about passing bills. Right. Sometimes we can contact agencies and get mistakes worked out. We can contact local government entities. Sometimes just shining the light on the subject gets the right attention to the issue, so that they're victim to bureaucracy. Some years ago, a lady called me, and her son was a quadriplegic, and the state agency here locally responsible for benefits on the Medicaid side had attributed the expenses that he used for his guide dog, his assistance dog. They said, "Well, you've spent too much money. Your asset threshold is too high. We need to turn your benefits off."
Oh my God.
Well, as it turns out, the individual that made that decision was mistaken. That wasn't the way that the law reads, but it was an honest mistake. But still, it was done, from what I gather, very abruptly. And I got a phone call from the mother. We called the agency and had things restored within 24 hours. There are things like that all of the time. And then there are some times when you try, and sometimes you can't always get the result the constituent wants. Yeah. But what you find is that by trying and working hard, that's what they really want to see. If you don't get a good result, they're still grateful that you tried.
Right.
And that because we'll get people who will come my way from other individuals in government that maybe don't want to deal with the issue.
Right.
We'll always take them, some of the toughest constituent cases. And if the answer at the end of the day is, this is what we tried to do, but we can't help, then that will be the answer. And that's a difficult thing about politics, because most people, I'm not going to say most, many people in elected office don't ever want to say no, because it's a hard thing to say no.
Yeah, right.
So we try not to say no, but sometimes you have to say no.
Well, and I think, again, that's I'm sure that when you heard the thing about the guide dog, like your first, when you're just Kevin Bacon, not the senator guy sitting at home, smoking a cigar. I'm kidding. But hanging out or whatever, like you're like, man, that's ridiculous that happened, right? Like, we got to get this fixed. Like, you really care. And that's what I want to stress that you're a human being, like, just like I am, just like Jill is, and like, you care about other people, and that's what it's about. So, so you're getting out of, you're no longer going to be a state senator. Are you still allowed to be called senator, or is it former senator?
Well, as my time in elected office, I'm around a lot of elected officials and former elected officials, and when I'm talking to others, I use the more formal route, and that is I call them by their highest elected office. So if I see Greg Lashetka, and I do see Greg Lashetka, I still call him mayor.
Okay.
If I see Joanne Davidson, I still call her speaker. Okay. That is I bumped into a state representative that was 96 years old that hadn't served in 40 years up in Defiance, Ohio years ago, and I called him representative.
Wow.
That's just the way I handle it. Now, that said, you've always known either when I'm in office or out of office,
yeah,
you can call me Kevin, you can call me whatever you want. I will not be offended. But
right.
when I deal with others, I use that formality.
Yeah, it's a respect thing. Let me ask you, have you ever been to the White House?
I have. Now, I've been through multiple times. I haven't had like a personal, tour with the president or anything like that, but I've been through it quite a few times.
Been to any dinners there, anything like that?
I wish I could tell you that I did.
Yeah.
No, I've never had dinner at the White House. I've been able to meet some very fascinating people in elected office and do a lot of great things. Although I'll tell you, it is fun when you go out to Washington, D.C., because when John Boehner was Speaker, he's from Ohio. And so when I would go out to Washington, D.C. for something, conferences or work or whatever, I would always stop by his office, because you don't know how long. Speaker's a tough job. You don't know how long that's going to last.
Right.
So I always enjoyed going out and going up and talking to his staff and meeting with people and learning a little bit about what they do, while I was out there. And occasionally he'd even come out and talk. I think once he came out and talked to us right after a meeting with President Obama and Nancy Pelosi. So tried to learn as much as I can and do some of those things while I can get the access.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Jill, my wife Jill, is on here and says, have you been in the West Wing?
I haven't, but I know plenty of people that have.
Yeah.
That have been there, worked in the White House, and we've got people from Ohio working out there right now. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think, it's exciting that now, because you haven't been in private practice, your law practice, exclusively in a long time.
That's right. That's right. I'll be full-time private sector after the year.
Maybe you'll start making some big money now.
But but when I started running for office, I never planned on just continuing to go back and forth from the House and the Senate.
Yeah.
You get to a point. I love the work, but when you go to the House of Representatives, you have 2-year terms. It means you spend every other year running for running for reelection.
Right.
I have 3 daughters, 3 teenage daughters, and 2 at St. Francis de Sales and 1 at Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
So you get to a certain point where holding 2 jobs and managing a family and running for office every other year gets a little more difficult.
Yeah.
If it was just me, then that would be one thing, but I have a lot of other people to take care of too. So.
Sure. Well, man, I want to finish with this one question, and I ask everybody this, and I don't think I don't know that you've ever been through it, but I have. I didn't go to college, didn't have the great father figure growing up, so I put myself in situations where the electric bill was getting ready to be shut off because I hadn't paid it, or I've had a car repossessed or what. So if somebody came to you and they said, take the senator out of it, take all of that out, and they just said, Kevin, my electric's getting shut off. I lost my car. My business is just failing, and I don't know what to do. And I'm just in a bad place mentally. What would you say to that person? Not give them, but what would you say to them to help them over that hump, that mental hump that they need to get over?
Well, when someone's facing a challenge like that, what I would convey is I can't just say it in a phrase or two, but there are levels to that. Obviously, the dedication, the determination, you have to have the will and the desire to figure it out. So sometimes people in that situation get so overwhelmed they don't know where to start.
Right.
So my words, my coaching, my words of encouragement would be to sit down and, okay, let's go. You have to do an analysis. You have to go. I wouldn't be able to give that person an answer without knowing more about them.
Right.
Maybe for someone, it's about sitting down. Let's get your job figured out, your budget figured out, and create a plan to execute. And others, they might be at a point, bankruptcy and move on and do other things. So
right.
It's important for people to be able to self-analyze. Sometimes you get to a place where it's like logs on a fire. You don't even know where the fire's coming from anymore. And,
right.
You get to a point where it all just gets muddled together.
Mm-hmm.
But people tend to not to go back and think, in specifics. How much do I make? What are my bills? How can I find a job? Who can I reach out to talk to? Put the pen on the paper and go back, in addition to the encouragement, but actually creating a plan on how to get through that hurdle. And sometimes, unfortunately, Ken, in people's life, it's a controlled fall.
Yeah.
No one would want to have to file bankruptcy, for example, but sometimes you get to a point where you have to start over and then start fresh.
Yeah.
So you never like to tell someone it's a controlled fall, and you hope not, but sometimes that's a possible path that, to go down that's better than something worse. So it's all just about analyzing the situation and a lot of encouragement and dedication to make things right for you and your family and everyone else that, around you.
Well, but and again, you've been through it. Like you just recently went through a controlled fall. You lost the congressional race or for the primaries, right?
That's right.
You didn't win. And so it's like, had you won the primary, you would have been campaigning all this time for the election. Had you won the election, you'd be moving on to a totally different thing than what you're planning on now. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that it doesn't matter what happens. What matters is how you respond to it.
That's right. That's right. Because you're always going to have things in life that don't turn out the way you want.
Right.
And if you've ever heard Tim Kite, if you ever watched Tim Kite, so he'll teach you. I know I don't have a lot of time here, but everything that he teaches on is based on the only thing you can control sometimes is your how you react to things.
Yeah.
Sometimes other things around you, you're just dealt, that they're handed to you, but you can control how you respond. And that's critically important to be able to try to master that one thing in life, the part that you do have the control over.
Love it, man. I love it. I've met Brian Kite, actually. They're phenomenal people. So, Kevin, thank you. I really appreciate it. I know I harassed you for a long time to come on the show.
Sorry.
But thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy. The message you delivered today was spot on. It was awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on, Ken. Appreciate it very much.
All right. So, hey, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you. Kevin, how can everybody follow you on Facebook?
Yes, I'm on Facebook. If you just, you can find me on Facebook. My personal page is just as good as any. That's where I do most of my posting than a government page. And I'm also on Twitter. Twitter and Facebook are the two ones that I probably use the most. I have a law website as well. That you did.
Oh, did really? I did it.
Yeah, that's my website.
Oh, yeah. Okay. What's the website address? Gosh.
Kevin Bacon Law. KevinBaconLaw.com.
KevinBaconLaw.com. There you go. Sorry, I did one other website in my career. So,
that would have been my Senate one then, because
right. Well, dude, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. You rock. I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you for all the shares. Chuck Studebaker, my buddy that's running down in Atlanta or Gwinnett County, he's on here. He said this was awesome. So
good luck, Chuck. If you need anything, let me know. That's a tough race, I'm sure.
Dude, I'll connect you and Chuck on Facebook. Maybe you could give him a couple pointers.
More than happy to.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Don't hang up, Kevin.
Okay.